A young girl found herself constantly forced to work without rest on a remote farm by her stepmother, a sinister plot orchestrated by the wicked woman. The girl's millionaire father was completely in the dark about his wife's abhorrent conduct until an unexpected contact shattered his composure and brought him to his knees. Take a moment to relax and let this story envelop you. Hello. I sincerely hope this acts as the perfect catalyst for a night of restful sleep. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. Let's dive in. The small hand clutched the teddy bear tightly, revealing old faded marks on her wrist. Lily tried to hide them under her long sleeve, but as her father approached, his gaze fell right on that darkened skin. Her small body gave a slight shiver. Her breath hitched, and a creeping wave of apprehension washed over her. Edward paused, his eyes clouded with confusion. An image of his late wife flashed in his mind, the woman with the gentle smile and hands that were always warm when they touched their daughter. She had warned him once, she scares easily. Never let her feel alone. Yet, here he was, having allowed exactly that to happen. Since losing his wife, Edward had buried himself in his career, building a financial empire. But the more successful he became, the emptier his residence felt. Lily gradually got used to seeing her father only through a phone screen, accustomed to hearing his voice mixed with the static of bad connections. Vanessa, Montgomery entered their lives like a sudden gust of wind. She was attractive, brilliant, and an expert at saying exactly what Edward needed to hear. Her presence seemed to bring laughter back into the house. At least that's what he convinced himself. Lily didn't harbor ill will toward Vanessa immediately. She still remembered their initial meeting. The woman had leaned down and smiled. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm your new stepmom." The voice was sweet and comforting, but there was a coldly indescribable glint hidden deep in her eyes. The moment Edward left the room, that smile evaporated like dust in the wind. Now in the spacious kitchen, Lily stood motionless, still clutching the small plush toy. Vanessa sat across from her, her face flawlessly made up, her lips a deep crimson. She crossed her legs, set down her teacup, and her eyes briefly darted to the girl's wrist. A faint smirk touched her lips, just enough for Lily to understand that her father wasn't supposed to see those bruises. "Lily, did you have a mishap?" Edward asked in a low voice. Lily pressed her lips together shyly. Before she could give details, Vanessa intervened smoothly, her voice as soft as a silk thread. "Children are full of energy, you know, honey." She was running, tripped over a chair, and that's the result. The explanation drew a small smile from Edward. He wanted to believe it. He always wanted to believe he had chosen correctly, someone who could take care of his daughter when he wasn't around. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, offered a brief thanks, and retreated to his home office where stacks of documents awaited his attention. The instant the door latched shut, the atmosphere in the room shifted drastically. Vanessa's voice lost its sweetness, becoming low and void of warmth. She looked toward the floor where a small spill stain remained. Her shoe tapped dryly, the sound of the heel resonating like a whip cracking in the air. Lily crouched down to pick up a cloth, her small hands trembling. She tilted her head enough for her hair to hide her face. Every time her hand scrubbed against the floor, the lesions on her wrist burned intensely, but she didn't dare stop. Vanessa approached, stopping right behind her. A chilling hand settled on Lily's shoulder, pressing down firmly. Her voice was steady, neither raised nor lowered. "In this home, only one person is in charge." Lily remained silent. Only the sound of the cleaning cloth dragging across the tiles filled the void. She tried to hurry, but her hand shook, knocking a glass off the counter. It rolled and then shattered on the floor. The glass shards scattered, one piece creating a minor cut on her finger, causing a thin red thread of blood to appear. Lily bent down frantically to pick up the pieces, but a sharp, unexpected impact landed directly on her cheek. She stumbled, momentarily stunned. Vanessa's voice whispered, firm and cold, "Don't make any more mess." Lily maintained her kneeling posture, tears dripping onto the floor, mixing with the spreading red stain. Every sound seemed to fade. Upstairs, Edward remained at his computer, the screen's light reflecting on his thoughtful face. He had no idea that beneath his feet, every drop falling was a desperate, unspoken plea for help. He still held the conviction that his daughter was safe and loved. Lily meticulously cleaned every trace of the incident, carefully picking up the broken glass and placing it in the trash bag. When she turned around, Vanessa was still by the threshold with her arms crossed, her expression blank. A quick, piercing glare forced the girl to lower her gaze. Deep in her chest, her heart beat erratically. She swallowed a sob, mumbling the familiar phrase Vanessa had taught her to repeat. "I must not bother Mother." When Edward returned, Vanessa had resumed her tender facade. She offered him a drink and shared light anecdotes during dinner. Lily sat beside him, hugging herself tightly, not daring to touch the utensils. Every time Vanessa laughed, the girl's shoulders gave a tiny tick. "Eat something, honey." "Why haven't you touched your food?" Edward asked gently. Lily replied in a low voice, "I'm full." "She's quite a picky eater," Vanessa smiled. "I'm going to instill better discipline in her." Edward nodded, trusting his wife's perceived competence. Lily knew that her discipline was what caused those horrible marks. When the meal concluded, Vanessa gave orders while Lily headed to her room. She placed the teddy bear on her table, her hand trembling as she touched her cheek. The skin still burned. The red impression of 5 fingers was clearly visible. She leaned in, pressing her face against the plush toy, whispering as if addressing an imaginary confidant. "Your daddy still has no idea, does he?" Before closing her eyes, Lily remembered the first time Vanessa had set foot in the house. The woman had smiled radiantly, holding white flowers that she placed on her mother's memorial table. The gesture was delicate, but her eyes held no sadness. That look was so icy that Lily felt as if her home no longer belonged to her, now amidst the silent walls. She heard footsteps from the floor below, slow, heavy, rhythmic. With every thud, her small body instinctively recoiled. When the sound stopped, she held her breath, waiting. The bedroom door opened softly. A dim light outlined Vanessa's face. A thin smile appeared, and her hand moved to the blanket, adjusting the edge of the pillow, a gesture of fabricated tenderness. "Sleep well, daughter." The door closed, and darkness returned. Lily lay motionless, clutching the teddy bear, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. She didn't cry, only taking heavy, slow breaths, her heart gradually slowing in the silence. But in that moment, she realized something profound was changing. It wasn't just the marks on her hands, but the feeling of being trapped between 2 realities, one where her father believed she was loved, and another where every smile tasted like prison. Mom. She turned over, hiding her face in the pillow, whispering weakly, "I'm okay, Mom." But the sound barely left her throat before fading away. Outside, the hallway light stayed on. Downstairs, Vanessa sat in the chair, flipping through documents on Edward's desk, her gaze lingering on his signature. A faint smile of satisfaction appeared at the corners of her mouth. The house shone so brightly you could see her reflection clearly in every glass panel. Everything was precisely in its place. Chairs aligned, plates stacked symmetrically, curtains tied evenly. Only the little girl standing in the middle of the floor seemed out of place, her bare feet trembling subtly on the cold tile. In front of Lily was a blank sheet of paper taped to the wooden door. The handwriting was neat and precise, as if ruled straight. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not sit at the dining table. Do not look directly at Mrs. Vanessa. She stood behind her, arms crossed over her chest. Vanessa. Lily. Her gaze was fixed on the back of the girl's neck, a metallic and unsettling stare. Lily read every line, her voice small and raspy, then fell silent. A dry tap was heard, Vanessa's pen hitting the table, a signal. "Have you memorized this?" Her voice was low, every word enunciated. "Yes, ma'am." "Then begin." The girl picked up the mop, pouring water onto the floor. The cold water spilled, the wet cloth wrapping around her small hand. Every scrub against the floor produced a soft, harsh sound. Vanessa paced, her high heels clicking in a steady rhythm. "Lily, you missed a patch of dirt." A quick, forceful yank of her hair. Lily flinched, biting her lip, holding back any sound. Vanessa lifted the girl's head, leaning close to her ear, whispering softly, "You should be grateful your mother is still instructing you." When the woman walked away, Lily collapsed on the floor, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. She wiped her tears, then resumed cleaning, this time with such meticulous care that even the grout between the tiles had to shine. A moment later, the phone rang in the living room. Vanessa instantly shifted her tone, making it as smooth as velvet. "Honey, I'll send you a photo." She's studying so diligently. She turned around, lifted her phone, and quickly captured a photo of Lily hunched over a book in the dim light. The image looked like a peaceful moment of a well-behaved child. Vanessa adjusted the filter, adding a warm, golden tint, and sent it with the message. "Hi, we are doing great. On the other end." Other end. Edward looked at the photo with a slight lift of his mouth. He saved it, feeling relieved. In his mind, his wife was excelling in her role as a mother. Back in the kitchen, Lily was rinsing the cleaning cloth soaked in water. A reddish hue from her fingertips spread into the basin. She swirled it gently, waiting until the water turned murky before daring to pour it out. The wall clock relentlessly marked every movement of the hands, making her tense. Vanessa returned, her eyes scanning the floor. She leaned down, touching a faint spot near the table leg. "Lily, can you not perceive that?" Her voice was even, not loud, but it made the air heavy as lead. Lily knelt quickly, scrubbing harder with the cloth. The thin skin of her hands chafed and wept a little fluid. She scrubbed until her breathing turned into short gasps, then finally stopped. Vanessa watched, her gaze slow, satisfied. When the woman left the room, Lily slumped to the floor, resting her back against the wooden cabinet. Her finger touched the small, fresh abrasion on her wrist, a red thread seeping out. She didn't cry, just breathed heavily, looking up at the ceiling as if searching for a small space to hide. "But there wasn't a corner vast enough for a girl like her, Lily?" Vanessa's voice drifted from the living room, light as smoke again. "Are you done? Don't let your father see the house messy." Lily clenched her small fists, stood up, and continued her work. On the wall, the framed photo of the three of them hung centrally. Edward's smile was clear, and Vanessa tilted her head near his shoulder. Lily was on the edge of the frame, her face tense, her smile awkward, as if pasted on. She looked at the photo, tilting her head slightly. Everything in it looked warm, but why did it feel so icy? She remembered the day her father introduced Vanessa. Back then, Vanessa was very kind. She had given Lily a small necklace, claiming it was a symbol of affection. That night, Lily held the necklace, truly believing her life was about to get better. But shortly after, that same chain became an instrument to pull her hair, to punish her. "Lily." A slight sound from the staircase startled Lily. Vanessa was descending, holding a cup of tea. She stopped, observing the girl from above, a fleeting smile on her face. "Do you remember the third rule?" Lily lowered her head. "Do not look directly at the madam." She nodded, then moved away, her step soft. Vanessa walked away, her step steady like a countdown. Lily watched her go, her palms sweating. She knew if her eyes met the woman's once more, the sanction would escalate. She bent lower, scrubbing the floor one last time, then gathered her cleaning tools. The living room door clicked shut, leaving only condensation and the sound of breathing. The girl walked to the wash basin, removed her apron, and examined her reddened hands. Her nails were chipped, dried bodily fluid clinging to the cracks. She wrapped them in a cloth, hiding them behind her apron. The phone rang again. Vanessa laughed out loud, her voice sweet as melting sugar. "Honey, she is such a good girl. I am so lucky to have her." In the kitchen, Lily pressed her lips together, burying her head in her arms. The steam from the basin dampened her hair. A drop of water rolled down her cheek, mixing with a tear. She walked silently into the hallway, stopping before the poster of rules. In the dim light, the dark letters appeared clearer than ever. She extended a trembling finger, touching the first line. The ink smeared on her hand, but she kept touching it as if she needed proof that those words were real. Behind her, Vanessa's voice sounded again, this time slow and firm. Not in bed yet? Lily turned around, standing straight, her eyes wide. Vanessa approached, her strong perfume filling the air. She leaned in, her voice light as a breeze. Lily, I do not like you wandering when your father is away. Lily nodded, her hands clenched. Go to your room. The girl turned, walking very slowly, every step like walking on broken glass. Once inside her room, she closed the door gently, leaning against the wall, still holding the ink-stained paper tightly. Lily sat in the quiet room. The smell of soap and steam still lingered in the air. Her small hands were cracked and split from the freezing water, her skin peeling, every movement stinging. She tilted her head, looking at the abrasion on the back of her hand, blowing gently as if comforting herself. Outside in the hallway, Vanessa's sounds were consistent. The click of heels on the floor, the stirring of a teacup, the rhythmic breathing of someone satisfied with their complete power. Lily listened, so accustomed that even a slight variation in sound would signal she was about to be summoned. When the footsteps stopped, Lily looked quickly toward the wooden closet where she used to keep her old belongings. A thin sheet covered a layer of dust. She took a deep breath, her hands gently pulling back the fabric. Lily. Underneath lay a small doll. Its curly hair matted, its dress faded, its face cracked in places, but still holding the gentle smile it had the day her mother gave it to her. Lily sat hugging it against her chest. Her cheek rested on the doll's hair, and she closed her eyes, trying to remember her mother's scent, the faint jasmine in her hair, the soft soap every time her mother washed her hair. Lily. A tear fell, soaking the doll's fabric. Lily hugged it tighter, but before she could wipe the tear, the sound of heels echoed from the hallway again, slow, steady, and stopping right behind her. She shivered, turning around. Vanessa was there with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. The sight of the object in Lily's hands made the air thicken and turn heavy. Lily. That thing. Vanessa's voice was low. Is still here? Before Lily could react, the woman's hand snatched the doll. The girl jumped up, snapping, "Give it back!" Vanessa turned her head, her eyes cold. You don't need to keep trash in this house. She walked to the fireplace, opened the grate, and violently threw the doll inside. A dry poof was heard. The fire ignited quickly, licking the old fabric. Lily lunged instinctively but was shoved back violently. Her small arm was grabbed firmly, her back hitting the edge of the table. A small crack echoed in her body. Sharp pain shot from her shoulder to her back. Are you going to make me lose my patience again? Vanessa spoke, her voice icy and steady like a final judgment. The girl fell, gasping for breath, her eyes fixed on the flames. The doll's dress burned red, small black fragments falling like ash. She wanted to scream, but her throat tightened. Her small body curled up, her hands reaching out in vain. But it was already over. When the fire subsided, Vanessa placed a blank sheet of paper and a pen on the table. She didn't need to speak much. One look was enough for Lily to understand. Right. The small hand grasped the pen tightly, her knuckles white. The scrawled lines emerged shakily. I must be grateful to my stepmother. I must be grateful to my stepmother. Every line was like a knife slicing her tender psyche. She wrote, erased, and wrote again. Tears fell, smudging the ink. The paper became soft and damp, but Vanessa remained silent, just standing and watching, her eyes cold and slippery like glass. The girl trembled, her hand numb, but just as the last word finished, the pen slipped from her grasp. It fell to the floor, rolled once, and stopped right under Vanessa's foot. Lily looked up. In that moment, their eyes met. A strange light flickered in the girl's gaze, weak but stubborn. Vanessa noticed it. She raised an eyebrow, leaned down, picked up the pen, and placed it back on the table. Her voice was low and sharp. Tomorrow, write 10 more pages. And then ... Lily. The door closed, the sound of heels retreating. Lily sat motionless, sweat beading on her forehead, her wrist weeping a little red fluid. Her lips were dry and cracked. She looked at the paper on the table, the repeated lines like deep cuts. But among the countless words, one line of ink was smeared. The word grateful blurred into pain. The light of a small candle flickered on the wall, her shadow elongating, trembling, shaking. She lowered her head, took a deep breath, and wiped her face. The pain gradually gave way to silence. Her small hand rested on the edge of the table, pushing the chair back, and she stood up slowly. Her eyes drifted to the corner of the room where the remains of the doll still lingered in the fireplace. Lily approached, knelt, and reached out to pick up some scraps of fabric that hadn't burned completely. The smell of smoke rose, but she held on and squeezed them tightly, stuffing them into her pocket. "I still have you, Mom," she whispered, her voice husky as if speaking to herself. From the other room, Vanessa's voice came over the phone. "Honey, she is such a good girl. I am so lucky to have her." The sweet sound was sickening. Lily froze, looking through the crack in the door. The warm light from the living room poured in, illuminating the paper she had just written. She stared for a long, long time. Then, suddenly, she grabbed a sheet and crumpled it. The paper was crushed in her small palm, the ink staining her skin. She squeezed it so hard her fingertips turned white. In her mind, Vanessa's voice echoed. The repeated phrase, "You must be grateful to your stepmother." Lily closed her eyes, murmuring under her weak breath, "I am only grateful to my real mother." She stood up, gently opening the door. The hallway was long, the light dim. She took a step, her bare foot touching the cold floor. The wind whistling through the crack in the door created a soft sound, like someone knocking. She looked around. Everything was terribly still. From the distance, the sound of heels approached Vanessa's heels. The girl panicked, backing up, her hand quickly pulling the door, and the sliver of light vanished. Lily. The air in the room was dense and dark, with only the small flickering candle remaining. Lily turned around, resting her back against the door, inhaling sharply, then exhaling very slowly. The golden light shone on her face, illuminating her reddened eyes. She looked toward the old fire in the hearth where the ashes still smoldered. A draft passed. The candle flame wavered, almost extinguishing, but then flared up again. Lily touched her chest, where she hid the burnt fabric fragment. The candle reflected in her eyes, fragile, but with something else too. A spark of quiet light. Thin, but real. She didn't cry. She didn't call out. She wasn't afraid. She just sat still, watching the trembling light in front of her. Then she whispered in a voice so faint it seemed to dissolve into the air. "Mom, I won't let them take everything from me." The candle flickered once more, then burned brighter with resilience. Outside, the wind prolonged its howl, and in the darkness, a girl was learning to stand up in silence, unnoticed. The sound of a knife hitting the cutting board was rhythmic, cold, and dry. The scent of food cooking mixed with hot oil, enveloping the heavy atmosphere of the kitchen. Lily stood in the corner, back straight, holding a basin of water. Her eyes fixed on the gleaming, clean tile floor. She didn't dare breathe heavily, but every breath had to be timed. She had to be silent. On the counter, Vanessa placed the freshly cooked dishes, her face calm as if nothing had ever happened in this house. "Be careful," she said, her voice light but with a thin layer of hidden poison. "Edward will be here soon. Everything must be flawless." Lily nodded. Her hand slipped on the bowl, the warm water soaking the old lesions on her wrist. The strong stinging sensation made her tighten her grip on the cloth, but she made no sound. She shed no tears. Before, every time she felt pain she cried "Mom," but now she knew that if she made a sound, the sanction would be more severe. Lily, The sound of heels resonated behind her. Vanessa's heels, steady and unhurried. With every step closer, Lily's shoulders tensed a little more. She kept her head down, scrubbing the basin harder. A cold finger rested on her shoulder. The small body jumped. Vanessa's voice was even and low. Did no one instruct you on how to work without splashing water everywhere? Before Lily could answer, the hand grabbed her hair, pulling it back forcefully. Lily's small face was pressed against the counter. The wet sound of water, the smell of grease and cooking oil mixed in her choked breath. Lily tried to inhale. Her throat constricted, and no sound escaped, only a sharp, short, weak gasp. See how you've stained my kitchen, Lily? Vanessa whispered, her breath close to Lily's ear, chilling her to the bone. A strong shove sent Lily falling backward, her back hitting the wooden cabinet. She slid to the floor, her hand catching on an old scar on her wrist. The unhealed injury opened, stinging intensely. Her breathing broke into small, jagged gasps. Vanessa said nothing more. She wiped her hands, adjusted her dress, and walked away calmly. The expensive perfume mixed with the smell of burnt oil, leaving a dense void in the kitchen. Lily remained seated. Her small hands trembling, she picked up a piece of broken glass from the floor, placing it in her palm. The shard was thin as a blade, reflecting the dim light. The bright glare hurt her eyes, but she didn't let go. The first drop of red fluid fell, mixing with the water, and she watched it without fear, without tears, just feeling a very faint and strange beat in her heart, both painful and warm. The front door opened. Edward's voice resonated, tired but cheerful. I'm home. Vanessa turned around immediately, a smile appearing in less than a second. Just in time, darling. Dinner is ready. Her voice came out completely changed, light as silk. Lily, bring more plates, sweetheart. The girl stood up in a hurry. Sweetheart. Her hand was bleeding, but she hid it with the cloth, biting her lip, placing every plate on the table. Edward smiled at his daughter, completely oblivious to how much her small hands were shaking, almost shattering a bowl. You've worked hard. Thanks, Lily, he said, his voice warm and sincere. Lily bowed her head, replying softly, It's nothing, Dad. Her voice trembled, but she forced a smile. Thank you. Her father's gaze warmed her, even if only for a moment. Even if only for a few seconds. Vanessa watched the exchange, maintaining her smile, but her eyes narrowed as Edward picked up a piece of fish. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder, speaking sweetly. You know, honey, she clumsily spilled the whole basin of water earlier, but I told her not to worry because she was trying so hard. Then Lily bowed her head even lower, her throat constricting. Edward laughed lightly, looking at his daughter. It's okay. Everyone is clumsy sometimes. As long as you know how to correct your mistakes, I'm happy. He didn't know that every instance of correcting mistakes for Lily was a condemnation. Vanessa subtly touched his hand, glaring at Lily a brief look. But enough for the girl to understand. If your father sees the blood on your hand, things will get worse. Lily. The meal continued in a forced silence. When Edward got up to take a call, Vanessa also rose, saying she would help tidy up. She leaned over the table, lowering her voice enough for Lily to hear. Next time, if you spill anything in the kitchen, I will make you eat directly off the floor. The words were spoken softly, but they cut straight through the girl's chest. Lily nodded silently, gathering the plates. When Vanessa turned her back, she looked at her, her eyes dull and heavy. While washing the dishes, Lily saw the shard of glass from before, still on the floor, reflecting the small light. She picked it up, hiding it in her apron pocket. Red fluid still seeped from her hand, but she stopped wiping it. A moment later, Vanessa's voice echoed from the living room, soft and steady. Honey, she is so adorable, but I think I need to be firmer with her so she doesn't get spoiled. Teach her your way, Edward replied without a hint of suspicion. I trust you know what is best for her. From the kitchen, Lily heard every word clearly. She stopped washing, the water running. Her lips tightened weakly. Her gaze fell on the apron pocket where the glass shard was hidden. She knew she couldn't tell her father anything. She had tried once at the beginning of her time with Vanessa. Her father had simply smiled, patted her head and said, "Your stepmom is trying to love you in her own way." Since then, she learned silence. When the house was shrouded in silence, Lily finished the last dish. Her hands were numb from the cold. She turned on the faucet to wash them, watching the thin line of red fluid spread and wash away. There in the basin, she saw her own reflection pale, eyes large and sunken. But there something had changed. Like a small glint under the water. She took a long breath, opened a cabinet, and took out a small wooden box. Inside, she kept the remaining fabric fragment of the doll. She placed the glass shard next to it, gently closing the lid. Lily. Her hands shook, but her eyes were calm. Lily. From afar, Vanessa shouted. "Go to your room immediately when you finish, understood?" "Yes." The girl's voice was small but steady. The kitchen door closed, the heat and smell of oil still clinging to the air. The paper sealed with a red stamp was placed on the desk. Edward's signature scrawled at the bottom. He hadn't read it thoroughly, just skimmed a few lines before signing. Lily ... Vanessa stood beside him, her smile soft and her voice light as a breeze. "I found a good place for Lily. The air is fresh, she have someone to look after her, she get healthier." Edward nodded weakly. In his mind, the image of his shy and fearful daughter convinced him it was necessary. He didn't know that signature was a ticket sending his daughter further away than he could imagine. When Lily was called downstairs, she only saw her small suitcase packed and ready. The driver opened the door of the silent black car. Vanessa placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, her voice smooth as honey. "Lily, you'll stay there temporarily. Be a good girl." Lily looked around as if searching for her father, but no one answered. The car door closed. The tinted windows obscured the world behind her. The journey was long and silent. The car drove away, leaving the city, passing jagged fields bathed in the sun. Lily curled up in the corner, her hands gripping the strap of her bag tightly, her fingertips white. Every jolt of the car tensed her shoulders. Only one phrase repeated in her mind. "Dad doesn't know. Dad really doesn't know." The car stopped in front of an old iron gate. The smell of damp earth and animal sweat mixed with the breeze. A sturdy, sun-weathered woman came out. Vanessa exchanged a few quick words, placing a thick envelope in the woman's hand. "Lily. Watch her for me for a while. Return her when I give the order." No one looked at Lily. A large, rough hand grabbed her shoulder, pulling her inside, pushing her through the gate. The gate closed behind her, the clash of metal resonating like a declaration. Inside was a vast area with barns smelling of dry hay and decaying waste. The next day, Lily was handed a broom, a bucket, and a rag. The woman spoke only one sentence. "Get to work. Eat when you finish." From then on, her days were nothing but labor. Morning, sweep the barn. Noon, scrub the floor. Late, clean hay, stack barrels. Hand gripping the broom, shoulder burdened by the bucket, bare feet stepping on the cold, wet ground. Every time she stopped, the woman's wooden stick whistled in the air, a reminder. Don't get tired. Lily learned to breathe softly. She learned to look down when someone passed. She began to differentiate footsteps from afar. The heavy steps were the farmhands. The light steps were the cows. The shuffling sound of sandals belonged to the woman she feared most. She learned to survive by listening. Once, while leaning over to collect water, her hand trembled. The bucket slipped, and water splashed onto the ground. The sound of water resonated in the silence. Before she could pick it up, the stick struck her back. Sharp, burning pain shot up her spine, choking her breath. Lily can't hold water? The woman's voice was harsh and dry, not angry, just objective. Lily doubled over, retrieving the bucket. Her hands were wet. The old abrasions tore open further. She bit her lip without crying, without speaking. That night, she lay on the old hay, wrapping her arms around her chest for warmth. The wind whistling through the wooden cracks sounded like a low moan. She looked through a small hole in the wall, seeing a thin strip of moonlight shining. The light shone on the dry grass, making her eyes sting. Lily gently reached out, catching that small stream of light. Inside, there was a faint beat, weak, but real. The next morning, she woke up early as usual. Cold water seeped into the cracks of her feet. The wind cut her skin. Carrying a barrel of hay, she stumbled, her knees hitting hard against the ground. Red fluid seeped out, staining the dirt. The ranchwoman looked at her, scoffing softly. "Get up, weakling." She braced her hands on the ground, wobbling to her feet. No one helped. No one looked twice. Lily's meals consisted of a bowl of dry rice and cold-boiled vegetables. She ate quickly, afraid of being scolded for taking too long. Every swallow made her throat dry as sand. Yet, she ate. She survived. In the afternoon, she saw a boy passing nearby. He was a cowherd about her age, messy hair, feet covered in mud. He threw a cooked potato to her without saying anything, just smiling. Lily stared blankly. The boy looked at the potato in her hand, warm and fragrant. For the first time in many days, she ate and felt warmth. When she looked up, the boy had walked away, just a small figure against the red sky. As night fell, she lay back in the hay in the darkness. Her breathing mixed with the sound of insects. She started counting the seconds in silence, ensuring she was still alive. A small thought crept in. If I escape, I might find Dad again. She sat up, retrieving a piece of paper from her pocket. It was the woman's discarded food wrapper. She smoothed it out, using a piece of burnt wood as a pen. Her trembling hands carefully wrote the messy lines. "I need to see my dad." She finished writing, looking at the charcoal-smudged words, then folded it. She didn't know who to send it to. She only knew to hide the paper under the hay where she slept. Outside, the wind howled through the wooden cracks, carrying the scent of grass and smoke. In the sky, a crescent moon tilted at an angle, shining faintly. Lily closed her eyes, her hands still resting on her chest where her heart beat weakly but with obstinacy. She didn't know how long it would take for someone to find that paper. Maybe a passerby. Maybe the shepherd boy. Or her own father. The ring of the telephone resonated in the quiet home office. Edward leaned in, looking at the unknown number. He intended to ignore it, but a premonition stopped him. The voice on the other end was rough, shaky, and urgent. "Sir, are you Lily's father?" His heart seemed to stop. "Yes, I am." "What is it?" The woman's voice was broken. I work at a ranch upstate. There is a young girl being forced to work here. She says her name is Lily, and I think you need to know this." The sound of wind whistled through the receiver. Edward shot up, his chair crashing behind him. His hand gripped the phone tightly, knuckles white. He didn't answer, just listened to his own heart beating erratically in his chest. "I'm sorry, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." The woman's voice trembled. "If you don't come quickly, I'm afraid the girl." The sentence hung unfinished. The line cut. Every sound in the room seemed to fade. "I'm sorry." Only the ticking of the clock remained, prolonged, slow, like a countdown. Edward grabbed his keys, ran out of the house, and jumped into his car. The sky was hazy, the car headlights blurry in the white mist. The road stretched endlessly. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his joints stiff. Questions hammered in his head. Why did Vanessa lie? Why is the girl there? The car swerved down bumpy dirt roads. When the iron gate appeared in the headlights, his chest tightened. The gate was rusty, chained with heavy links, and inside was a mud-mottled yard. Edward got out, violently pushing the gate. The metal screeched loudly. The smell of damp earth mixed with decaying hay rushed out. In the middle of the yard, a small girl sat milking a cow. Her hair was matted, her shirt torn, her hands scarred and cracked, her bare feet covered in mud. Every movement was slow, rigid, as if she feared making a mistake. Edward froze. The sight felt like a deep cut straight to his heart. Every memory of the photos Vanessa had sent Lily in a white dress sitting diligently at her desk, Smiling brightly suddenly exploded like smoke. Lily. Lily. He called softly, his voice breaking. The girl looked up. Her large, round eyes were startled. She jumped, then quickly lowered her gaze as if by reflex. Her trembling small hand knocked over the milk bucket. Lily. The milk spread across the ground. Honey. He approached, his voice tense. It's Dad. Lily stood up, backing away half a step as if she couldn't believe it. Her lips moved without emitting sound. The car lights illuminated her bruised face and puffy eyes. Edward rushed forward, kneeling, hugging her tightly. The small body was as light as paper, completely cold. Her hands grabbed his shirt, holding on firmly as if afraid he would vanish if she let go. I'm here, my little one, he whispered, his voice husky. The girl didn't speak, just clung tighter, her breath ragged, shaking uncontrollably. The smell of milk, mud, and smoke clung to her shirt, marking every day she had endured. Behind him, footsteps approached. The ranch woman's voice was calm, steady. Oh, you're here. The girl is quite obedient. She just needs more discipline. I thought Vanessa would have informed you. Edward turned around. His eyes were bloodshot, his gaze so intensely sharp that the woman froze. Her voice cut off in her throat. You call this discipline? He said, his voice deep but with a touch of fire. She forced a smile, moving closer. Sir, you misunderstand. I only. Shut up. The two words came out cold as steel. The woman stood stunned, stepping back. Edward bent down, lifting his daughter. Lily buried her face in his chest, clutching his shirt. She still wasn't crying. Her tears seemed to have dried up long ago. He turned to leave, walking through the muddy yard. Every step felt like he was stepping on his own blindness. Behind him, the woman shouted, You can't take her like that. Vanessa. The car door slammed shut. The engine roared, drowning out all other sounds. The iron gate opened one last time, then closed behind them. The clash of metal was deafening, like the sound of the past being locked away forever. Lily sat in the back seat, curled up in her father's arms. The car lights shone on her small, pale face. The light passed over her wet eyes, glistening, but deep inside was an unspeakable exhaustion. Edward held her hand. His large, rough hand completely covered her tiny one. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I trusted the wrong person. Lily shook her head gently. She said nothing, just gripped his hand tighter. Her father's warmth spread gradually, making her fingers less cold. The car drove away from the ranch. Every curve, every stretch of road was a layer of deception stripped from her memory. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. When the city lights appeared in the distance, Edward looked in the rearview mirror. In the reflection, his daughter's face was marked by the dim light, her hair messy, her lips dry. But in her eyes, there was a strange shine, small, but genuine and sad. Lily. He turned around, asking softly, Where do you want to go now? Lily. The girl stayed silent, then looked up, her voice raspy. I just want to go home with you, Dad. Edward nodded, his eyes stinging. Lily, we are going home. No one will ever bother you again. I promise. Lily rested her head on his shoulder, her breathing becoming steady. The smell of his skin, his shirt, the scent of her father, it all merged into the comforting smell she thought she had forgotten. But in that moment, she finally realized she still had a place to return to. But in the back of her mind, where the faint flame of fear had not yet extinguished, she felt this wasn't over. She knew Vanessa wouldn't give in easily. That woman never accepted defeat. Her arm tightened around her father's shirt as if clinging to the fragile piece she had just recovered. Outside, the night passed. The streetlights swept the road in thin stripes, like fragments of memories torn by the wind. In Edward's arms, his daughter's warmth made him feel resurrected. But in his eyes, the burning light wasn't just affection, it was fury. And a silent vow. No one, not Vanessa, not anyone else, would ever have permission to hurt his daughter again. The home office was bathed in yellow light. Papers were scattered across the desk: contracts, bank statements, financial records. Everything was disorganized, but in Edward's eyes, every detail was now clearly visible. His finger traced the faint printed lines, his heart beating rapidly as if someone were squeezing it. The bank transfers, the repeated figures, the signatures that were familiar but subtly incorrect. The messy handwriting like his, but with a small difference, barely perceptible. A harder, colder stroke. He looked up, scanning the room. The wedding photo still hung on the wall. Vanessa in a white dress holding hands with him. A radiant smile. Looking at it now, that smile seemed painted on beautiful, but soulless. Edward flipped the stack of files. A single sheet of paper fell, sliding onto the floor. He bent to pick it up, then froze when he saw his company logo printed at the top. At the bottom was the signature of Edward Herrera, but he had never signed this document. In the margin notes, the messy handwriting was clear. Full authorization granted to Vanessa Montgomery for temporary asset management. His breath hitched. His trembling hand flipped through a few more pages. Every page was a deeper squeeze on his heart. Then he opened the right drawer of his desk. The lock had been tampered with. An envelope lay in the corner, sealed with a red stamp. Inside was a small hard drive and a bank book. On it, the beneficiary name was clearly displayed: Vanessa Montgomery. While he was still staring at the figures, a familiar voice sounded behind him. "What are you looking for?" Edward jumped, turning around. Vanessa stood in the doorway, the light reflecting in her eyes. The usual gentle look was gone. Only terrifying sharpness and confidence remained. Edward clenched the stack of papers, his voice husky. "What have you done with my accounts?" Vanessa approached slowly, her smile fleeting like a razor blade gently tracing skin. "You are always so hasty. If you had bothered to read the contracts, you would know I was just managing them for you. Temporarily." Edward leaned in, took the paper from her hand, and slammed it back onto the desk, his finger tapping rhythmically. "Everything is legal. You signed it all." Edward clenched his fist, his voice heavy. "These signatures aren't mine." Vanessa laughed softly, looking up. "Did you forget? You trusted me enough to sign blank authorization forms. I simply helped you finalize them." "Finalize?" He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Please, you call stealing assets and abusing my daughter finalizing?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow, tilting her head, her voice small and sharp. "The girl is weak. I was just teaching her to be stronger. And the assets. I was just restoring equity for myself." "Equity?" She looked him straight in the eyes, her lips tight. "Did you think I came to you for money? No, wrong one. I came because I understood what it was to be left behind. You always talked about love, but you never loved anyone completely. I just did what you always do. Take what I want." The sentence fell like a cold dagger. Edward looked at the woman before him. She was no longer the wife who used to smile gently every morning, but a completely different person, alien and threatening. "What did you do to Lily?" His voice cracked. Vanessa let out a slight laugh, turning to pour herself a drink from the cabinet. "Hi. The girl is fine. She's probably sleeping soundly in her own room now. I never detested her. It's just, she reminds me too much of your ex-wife." The drink in her hand tilted slightly, the reddish liquid reflecting on her pale face. Edward clenched his fist, taking a step forward, his voice dropping. "You will pay for everything you have done." Vanessa put down the drink, smiling faintly, unafraid. "Pay? You don't understand, Edward. You have nothing left to take back, Vanessa. Because all the assets, the company, the real estate, are in my name, even this house." She paused, looking at him with a defiant gaze, emphasizing every word. "You signed it all with your own hand." The air in the room was dense. Edward took a step back, his hand trembling. Every fragment of memory intertwined, the cut phone calls, The times Vanessa advised him to rest and let me handle it, the temporary contracts. And it was all now a complete picture. A game where he was the only player who didn't know he had been controlled from the start. He walked to the table, sweeping the family photo to the floor. The glass shattered, splitting the image of him and his daughter. "You never loved anyone," he said softly, his voice rough. "You only loved power." Vanessa burst out laughing, her smile thin as a knife's edge. "Loving power isn't a flaw, Edward. It's just different in that I dared to take it, and you didn't." She turned and walked away, her voice light as a passing breeze but chilling. "I advise you to stay quiet. Don't be foolish enough to go against someone who knows you better than you know yourself." The door closed. The sound was soft but cut deep. Edward stood in the room bathed in pale yellow light, the smell of old paper, liquor, and sweat. He gasped, bracing his hands on the desk, looking at the documents scattered on the floor. Every word, every number, every red stamp seemed to dance before his eyes. He understood he had been blinded in his own home. On the desk, the laptop light was still on. The small hard drive had rolled to the edge, its light blinking. Edward picked it up, plugging it into the computer. The screen showed hundreds of files recordings. Photos, transfer receipts, even a video clip of Vanessa signing documents under his name. And his whole body trembled. The first tears in years fell, not from fear, but from shame. In his mind, the image of Lily reappeared, her hands producing red fluid, her eyes filled with fear, her breath ragged in the darkness. He clenched his hands, wiping his tears, his voice soft but resolute. No, I won't let her win." His eyes changed color. It was no longer blind pain, just clarity and a small flame. The fire of a person who had lost everything and was prepared to take every single thing back. Outside the hallway, Vanessa's footsteps moved away, steady and confident. In the room, Edward stood motionless. His hand touched the hard drive, then moved toward the phone, his eyes fixed on the computer screen, like a warrior who had just found his weapon. In the pale blue light, his face was clear, calm, cold, and determined. The curtain of deception had been torn, and, for the first time, Edward knew the real confrontation had just begun. The morning was gloomy. The desk lamp shone on a thick stack of files. The figures, the bold font, the red stamps all seemed to be mocking Edward. He sat there, staring blankly at the computer screen. In his inbox appeared dozens of new emails, all from an anonymous address. The content was concise, cold, and precise as a scalpel. Want to know who is really behind everything? Check the name Richard Mendes. His heart skipped a beat. Richard, a name so familiar it was painful. The man who had called him my good friend Edward at countless cocktail parties, who had helped him in financial crises, his best friend. The colleague who had sworn loyalty. Edward opened the attachment. The first image froze him. Vanessa and Richard sitting in a restaurant by the sea, 2 glasses of reddish drink, her hand resting on his wrist, both looking at each other unmistakably intimately. He scrolled down. The bank transactions were clearly visible, massive sums of money transferred from the company account to a small fund under the name RM Consulting. Then the recipient column showed. Richard Edward gripped the mouse, his hand trembling. Next was the flight itinerary. The day Vanessa claimed to be on business in Paris coincided perfectly with Richard's trip. Airport surveillance photos showed them walking side by side, passing through security together. His chest tightened. Every image felt like a knife stab. He lowered his head, resting his hands on the desk, his nails digging into the wooden edge until they drew a little blood dot in his mind. Richard's laugh echoed clearly, sounding like a haunting memory of old times. "We are partners through thick and thin." That voice now sounded like pure mockery. The bulky file lay open before him. Edward picked it up, flipping page after page. Inside were internal memos, altered contracts, all with Richard's fingerprints. Some documents were signed with his forged signature. He called his investigator. The voice on the other end answered. "Hello, we have confirmed. Richard Mendes left the country 2 weeks ago. We are contacting Interpol." Edward closed his eyes, clutching the phone, his voice cutting off. When you locate him, detain him. I want to hear it from his mouth. 3 days later, a message arrived. Richard was arrested in Singapore, attempting to transfer funds offshore. Edward arrived at the police station. The white lights illuminated the interrogation room. In the middle of the room, Richard sat calmly, his shirt wrinkled, his wrist still bearing the old watch, the one Edward had gifted him 5 years ago. Edward entered, his breathing heavy. Richard looked up, offering a thin smile. You finally arrived. Why? Edward clenched his fist, his voice tense and husky. Why? Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes devoid of remorse. Because I was tired of living in your shadow. My shadow? My shadow? Edward emphasized the words, his voice breaking. I pulled you out of bankruptcy. I gave you opportunities. I treated you like a brother. And that's why. Richard interrupted, his voice light as a breeze. Everyone only saw you? Me? I was just the person Edward helped. I stopped having my own name. He lowered his head, laughing briefly. Vanessa understood that. She said one thing that was right. You can't. And she was right. Edward took half a step back. Every word Richard uttered felt like a needle pricking his chest. He continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. You trusted her. You trusted me. You trusted the whole system you thought you built. Actually, everything was predetermined. You were just the last to realize. Edward's hand shook. Richard slammed the file on the table. Papers flew everywhere. Predetermined? You call betrayal, you call harming my daughter predetermined? Richard looked him straight in the eyes, his gaze empty. I didn't lay a hand on the girl. But I knew what Vanessa would do. And I let it happen. Because you deserve to feel that pain. The pain of having everything taken from you. Then a heavy silence fell. The ticking of the clock was clearly audible. Edward took a deep breath, his voice sinking. You have destroyed yourself, Richard. Richard smiled, his eyes no longer bright. Maybe, but at least now you'll know how I felt back then. The accompanying officer signaled that time was up. The door opened. Edward walked out, his shoulders heavy with a burden. Behind him, Richard's voice still echoed, suspended, dry. Everything, Edward, only really begins when you think you are untouchable. The door closed with finality. Edward stood in the long hallway, the white light illuminating his pale face. He squeezed the statement sheet. Red fluid oozed from an old wound. Fury welled up inside him. But simultaneously, there was a chilling void. Back at home, he opened his computer, looking at the screen full of data evidence of Vanessa's transactions. Of Richard's. Everything was clear now. But instead of relief, he only felt sadness. The wind slipped through the crack in the door, turning the pages on his desk. The whisper was as if the papers themselves were reading his mistakes line by line, character by character. Edward sat still, looking out the window. The city was still bright. Cars still moved. Life went on. But for him, everything seemed to have stopped. He raised a hand to his forehead, sighing. In his mind, he heard Vanessa's voice, Richard's voice, and Lily's voice when she first called Dad after the days at the ranch. A tear fell on the edge of the desk. He spoke softly, almost whispering. I'm sorry, Lily. I let them turn our home into a nightmare. He closed the laptop, took a deep breath and stood up. His eyes shone this time not with anger but with clarity. In his hands now were two things: evidence and willpower. Vanessa was exposed. Richard was caught. And now only one task remained: bring them to justice. Edward turned around, leaving the room. The light turned off. The room plunged into gloom. Only the sound of the wind turning the pages remained, the sound of truth finally speaking. The small room was full of dim light. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. On the white bed, Lily curled up, clutching tightly to her old one-eared teddy bear. Her thin arm was wrapped around it, as if letting go would make everything disintegrate. Edward sat beside her, his eyes never leaving his daughter. Every time she moved slightly, he leaned in, calling her name softly, his voice quiet as if afraid to break the fragile space around her. Dad is here. Just sleep. Lily frowned subtly. Dad. A small sob escaped, and then she fell back into a restless sleep. The light reflected on a small scar beneath her wrist, making his heart clench. He reached out, touching the tiny hand gently, then closing his grip around it. Her hand was cold as frost. In the days that followed, the hospital became their second home. In the morning, Lily was taken to psychological therapy. Today, her father always waited outside, leaning against the wall, watching the closed door. Once, the therapist Sarah came out, speaking softly. She's very intelligent, but she isn't ready to talk. Every time she hears the voice of an older woman, she shrinks. It seems the trauma is still present. Edward nodded, his voice deepening. I understand. I just want her to not be afraid anymore. The therapy sessions continued. Lily sat still, not speaking, just drawing. Sarah. Every piece of paper began with thick pencil lines, distorted, intertwined, messy. But then in the middle of those dark patches there was always a stroke of gold. Thin, weak like a thread of light. Sarah smiled when she saw it. Sarah. She's finding her own way out. Edward looked at the drawing, his hand shaking slightly. Do you think she has forgiven me yet? Sarah shook her head. Forgiveness is less important than her belief that you won't disappear again. Just be there. Even if she doesn't speak. He fell silent. For the first time in his life, Edward learned the art of waiting. Not speaking much, not trying to explain, not asking about the past. Just being present. Little by little, hour after hour. At night, he read her short stories, read in a slow, steady voice. Sometimes Lily closed her eyes without reacting, but he kept reading until his voice went hoarse. And Lily. Lily. Once, when he paused, Lily opened her eyes gently, asking in a low voice. Son. Dad. This bear. Mom gave it to me, right? Edward froze, his throat tightening. Yes, your mom bought it at the Christmas market. Do you remember? Lily nodded gently, lowering her gaze. I dreamed I saw Mom standing outside the door. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me and left. Edward quickly took her hand, his voice trembling. Your mom will always be with you. And me too. I love you, Lily. You will never have to be alone again. The girl stayed silent, her fingers tightening subtly on his hand. A deep sigh escaped, small, but more genuine than any word. In the following weeks, Lily started school again. New school, new friends, everything was unknown. She walked slowly, her eyes usually down, but she no longer shrank when someone called her by name. Edward stood at a distance, watching every one of her steps. Sarah remembered the days when his daughter was little, laughing loudly in the park, running through the grass. Now, that laughter hadn't returned completely, but at least she dared to go out. That afternoon, Sarah called. Lily is progressing. She just told me about a dream. In it, there was light and an outstretched hand. She said this time she reached out and took it. Edward smiled weakly, a small smile, tired but sincere. Thank you. I think she is starting to believe. God. At night, he returned home, opening the door to her room. Lily was sitting at her desk, continuing her drawing. On the paper, there were no longer messy black lines, but two figures, one large, one small, sitting together under a tree. She looked up, smiling. The first true smile since everything happened. Look, Dad. Edward leaned into the drawing. A small ray of light shone in the distance, illuminating the whole frame with gold. Son. He stared for so long his eyes stung. You drew wonderfully, he said, his voice cutting off. I'm going to give it to you. He gently touched his daughter's hair, his heart fluttering. I will keep it forever. In the last therapy session, Sarah offered only one piece of advice. Don't try to erase her past. Let it remain. But teach her to look at it through different eyes. Edward nodded. He understood. Some wounds cannot be healed with apologies, only nurtured with patience. On the way home, Lily sat close to him, still hugging her bear. The light slipped across her face, catching her dark, round eyes. "Dad," she said, her voice soft. "I'm not afraid anymore." Edward turned, smiling, his eyes shining. "I know." The girl rested her head on his shoulder. The car rolled through the long streets. For the first time in months, Edward felt no guilt, only peace in his heart. He realized that forgiveness came not only from his daughter, but also from himself. "I know." When they arrived home, Lily ran to her room, hanging her drawing on the wall. Between the two figures in the picture, she added a small line, poorly written but clear. "Today, I am home." Edward stood in the doorway, watching silently. His throat tightened. Tears fell before he could wipe them. In that moment he knew. The battle was over. The sound of the hammer was steady, interspersed with the soft crack of wood. "Lily." Edward adjusted the window frame, wiping the dust covering the glass. In the corner of the yard, Lily carried a bucket of water, droplets glistening on her small hands. The smell of fresh wood, fresh milk and dry grass mixed as if everything was being born again. The long-abandoned house, with peeling walls and broken tiles, was slowly coming back to life. No words were spoken. Father and daughter worked together, each busy with their tasks. But occasionally, when Edward held a wooden plank, Lily would lean in to hold the other side. Their eyes would meet. A thin smile passed between them, small, but enough to lighten the atmosphere. At noon, they sat together on the porch. The wind blew, gently lifting Lily's hair. Edward poured milk into 2 cups, pushing one toward his daughter. "I think you're doing very well," he said. "Lily." Lily just smiled, her eyes still following a sparrow perched on the fence. "I like this place. It's peaceful here." Edward nodded. "Me too. This house used to belong to your grandparents. Now we are just fixing it so it can breathe again." Lily turned to look at him, asking softly, "Are you afraid, Dad?" Edward was surprised. "Afraid of what?" "Of the things that happened." He stayed silent for a moment, then replied slowly, "Yes, I am. But fear won't change anything, only living on will." The girl lowered her head, playing with the old teddy bear in her hands. "I am afraid too. But when I am with you, it is easier to breathe." Edward reached out and gently stroked his daughter's hair. "Then let's learn to breathe again. Together? Okay?" Lily nodded. In the afternoon, they started cleaning the storage room. In an old dusty cabinet, Lily discovered a small cloth-bound notebook. She wiped it gently, opening it. Inside were lines of smooth handwriting, slightly slanted, faded with time. She recognized the handwriting immediately. "It's Mom's," she whispered. Edward heard her and approached. He took the notebook, flipping. Through the pages, little scribbles, recipes, small notes, some phrases written for her daughter. On the last page, the writing stopped. "If you lose your way, let our child guide you back." They stood in silence. Lily. The wind blew softly, making the page flutter gently. Lily looked up, her eyes clear. Edward looked at his daughter, seeing the reflection of his late wife in those eyes. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice deep and warm. "Maybe your mother was always here, truly guiding me back." Lily smiled weakly, then closed the notebook, hugging it against her chest. "I'll keep it." At night, they sat on the porch, the moonlight spreading across the yard. The cattle in the distance grazed quietly, the tinkle of their bells resonating softly. Edward placed a vase of white flowers on the table. Lily, the ones his wife used to love. He poured a little more milk, his voice low. "You know, I used to think happiness had to be grand. Very obvious. Now I realize, this is enough. Just enough." Lily rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes closed. "I think Mom would like this place too." "Yes," Edward replied softly. "Your mother would be smiling." After a while, Lily looked up. Hey Dad, I want to plant more flowers around the house. White ones, like the ones in this vase. Good idea. But you have to remember to water them every day. I promise. She smiled, a genuine smile, void of apprehension. The moonlight reflected on her small face, making her eyes shine clear as drops of water in the quiet night. Edward looked around the house. What used to be just four cold walls now contained life, laughter, and light. Every corner bore their mark. A smear of paint, a slightly crooked chair, hastily placed flowers. Everything imperfect, but authentic. When Lily fell asleep, he walked quietly to her room. She lay on her side, still hugging the bear. The dim light covered her face, revealing some faint scars, evidence of the past. But in her steady breathing, in her warm heartbeat, Edward knew those scars were healing slowly. He gently pulled up the blanket, placing a kiss on her forehead. Sleep well, my daughter. Outside on the porch, the soft wind carried the smell of milk and dried flowers. The singing of crickets resonated from the distant fields. Today, Edward sat looking at the house they had just renovated. Every brick, every stroke of paint had a new meaning. In the distance, dawn was breaking. The first light shone through the window, hitting the picture hanging on the wall, the family photo, now with Lily's real smile. Edward stood up, stepping out into the yard. The girl was already awake, watering the flowers. Her hair was messy, her smile radiant. She paused, looking without saying anything. Lily turned around, shouting, "Dad! The water splashed your shoes." Edward laughed, bending down to wipe them. That is how we know we are alive. Both laughed, the sound resonating far, spreading across the yard. On the branch, the sparrow sang again as if joining their harmony. Amidst that sound, Lily suddenly spoke softly. "Dad, can we call this home?" Edward looked at his daughter, then nodded. "Yes, this is our true home." The girl smiled weakly, her eyes bright under the morning sun. On the table, the cloth-bound notebook was open, the last page turned gently by the wind. The mother's words seemed to whisper through the space. "If you lose your way, let our child guide you back." Now Edward had truly been guided home, not by money, not by success, but by the small, strong hand of the daughter he had almost lost. And that is our bedtime story for today. A journey filled with sadness, but also overflowing with hope, where a father recovered his lost heart, and a girl learned to trust in affection once more. Hello? What about you? After hearing this story, how do you feel? Who impressed you more? The patient and brave father, Edward, or the resilient girl, Lily, who overcame her own fears? Or perhaps they remind you of someone who entered your life, like a small light just like them? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. I am truly eager to read what touched your heart most in this narrative. Thank you. We can chat more about it before concluding a long day and allowing our minds to settle for a peaceful sleep.